Class A, ooh. Class B, Class C, Stick around, I'm going to show you exactly how multifamily is classified. Let's go! For many investors, classifying an asset is kind of subjective. It's really a sort of a look or a feel for an asset after years of experience. But because I love data and anything that involves an Excel spreadsheet, I'm here to tell you that classifying multifamily assets is more of a science. Classifying assets shouldn't just be limited to Class A, B, or C, because there's too broad of a difference between just A, B, and C for any one investor to understand the true value of each asset. I track them as Class A, B+, B, B-, C+, C, and C-. Now anything below a C- is going to be looking pretty ugly. Typically, those are boarded up, have really high vacancy, or might be in a terrible crime area. In my opinion, there are 5 determinants of an asset's class ranking. There's location, how modern are the updates, the rents, price per unit, and of course, age. I'm going to quickly describe those 5 and how they're used to determine classification, but then you're going to want to stick around because in the markets that I cover, we're going to go over a really cool condensed spreadsheet that shows class rankings and the price per unit, the rents, the bedroom to unit ratio, the ages. Number 1, location. Location by far is the number 1 determinant of an asset's classification. The reason is location sets the threshold that you could ever go to on a classification. What I mean by that is, let's say that an asset is located in an okay location, but it could be newer, it could have phenomenal remodeling and updates. The rents might even be pretty decent, but it could never be a Class A or probably even a B+ just because of its location. On the flip side, if you had an asset in a phenomenal A location, but it was old in age and hasn't been updated, it would still rank much higher in the classification than its peers just because of location. There are 4 factors that affect location. The first is the macro market or the MSA. Basically what that means is, let's say you have an asset in the Miami market, that would have a much greater probability of being an A-class asset depending on where it is within Miami versus let's say an asset that's in Micanopy, Florida. That could probably never be an A-class or B+ class asset. The second factor within location is its proximity to jobs, retail, entertainment, and food. The third factor in location is demographics, particularly education and income. Obviously, the higher the education and the income, typically the higher the rents are and the higher the classification of the asset. And the fourth factor of location is crime stats. Obviously, the higher the crime, probably the lower the classification of the asset. Typically, the second thing I look at when I'm classifying assets is how modern are the updates. What kind of kitchens are there? Bathrooms, countertops, cabinetry, flooring, amenities, pool, clubhouse, landscaping. Are the roofs newer? All those different things go into the classification of an asset. The third determinant in classification are rents. Obviously, the higher the rents are, the higher the likelihood is the classification is higher. Now, later in this video, I'm going to show you spreadsheets of actual rents by classification to give you an idea. The fourth determinant of classification is price per unit, which is very similar and tied to the rents. Obviously, the higher the rents, probably the higher it's selling for per unit, and therefore the higher it is on the classification schedule, which I will also show you in a spreadsheet coming up. And the fifth determinant I use to classify an asset is age. Typically 1950s, 60s, and 70s assets are falling in the C-, C, and C+ range. The 1980s, 90s, and up to mid-2000s falls in the B-, B, and B+ range. And the Class A assets are typically under 5 years old up to new construction. Hey, if you're getting value out of this video so far, do me a favor and hit the like and subscribe button. Now we're going to jump into my beautiful little spreadsheet. Now obviously each of these numbers will differ per market. This will give you a pretty good idea on ages and jumps in price per unit, jumps per rent in each classification. On the C minus, you can tell those are early 1970s. Keep in mind, these are all median numbers. So there could be a number of assets in there that are in the 50s and 60s and some that might be in the upper 70s. The bed to unit ratio is 1.1. That's how many bedrooms over a unit there are. They're trading at $44,000 a unit and the average rent's $575. Let's take a look at the C class. On the C class, those are just a little bit newer, little higher bedroom ratio, trading for $20,000 a unit more in my market, which is a nice little differential, but it's mostly because there's a $200 a month jump. And then you have the C pluses, which are still around the same range, around the same bed ratio, but now we're jumping up into the $80,000 a unit range. Now keep in mind, some of them will be in the 60s and 70s, some of them could be in the upper 80s. And of course, the rent has jumped another $100 a month and almost $300 a month over the C minus. Now you may be thinking, let me find a C minus asset, buy it, upgrade a little bit, and get it to a C plus for a $40,000 a unit jump. Well, it's not that easy. C minus assets are typically not in the greatest locations, and C pluses typically are in pretty good locations. So to find a C minus that's in the 500 mark, put enough value in there to jump rents $300 a month is a big deal. Very rarely happens. Now we're in the B minus and we're in the early 1980s. As you can tell, the bedroom ratio jumped up a little bit. Now we're into the 6 figures a unit, keeping in mind it could be in the 90s up to the 110, 120 mark. And of course, our rents have jumped nearly another $100 a month. On the class B side, now we're in the late 80s to early 90s, could even get into the early 2000s depending. We've now jumped another $30,000 per unit and another $100 a month. For the B pluses, now we're in the early 2000s to mid 2000s. Bedroom ratio is roughly the same, $35,000 a unit jump, and we're going up $250 a month. Now you may be thinking of jumping from a B minus to a B plus, but it's still really hard to jump 2 classifications. I hardly ever see it. However, to go from a B to a B plus, that's the sweet spot. The locational difference between a B and a B plus is typically not that different in the real world. They really do share the same locations. Here's the difference. Typically, B classes has everything it takes to be a B plus. It just needs to be updated a little bit, typically on the insides and maybe the outside. And in return, you can easily have a $250 a month jump going from B to a B plus. And as a result, you can be rewarded anywhere from $30,000 to $40,000 a unit on the value. Lastly is the Class A asset, which typically is under 5 years old. As you can see, the median here is 2018. A little bit higher bedroom ratio. Now we're in the $220,000 a unit range, and of course the rents jump up another $250, $300. All right. I already see where your head's going. Bo. Can we go from a B plus to an A? Yeah, it's actually possible, still very difficult to do, but possible. As well, B plus and A class locations are typically very similar. The difference is the B plus now has improvements that are 10 to 15 years old, and they need to be massively updated to compete with brand new state-of-the-art complexes with all the coolest appliances, amenities, grounds, flooring, and all that. As long as the B plus has a location that is as good as the A, then it's just a matter of spending the bucks to compete on the updates inside and outside the complex. And I would argue you may even have to have better improvements than the Class A, because people still choose the newest project. Now, if you want to see how I track classifications within my own markets and how I came up with these different spreadsheets, you can go to my website. Just visit bobeery.com, click on resources, select whatever market you want, and as soon as that comes up, you're simply going to scroll down and you check on trailing 24-month sales, and you will see as they come up, I classify each one of them all the way down and then give summaries on each of those. Now, whenever a listing hits the market by a broker or a seller and they talk about, hey, come buy this Class A asset or B plus, you'll know whether or not they're just full of. Now, you can give me value back by smashing the like button down below, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. By doing so, you'll be notified automatically when I put videos out instead of always having to come back to YouTube. And if you have an idea for another video you want me to do next, let me know. See ya!